Joyce Meyer is a very popular author and prosperity gospel preacher whom I would not normally quote because the prosperity gospel is not such a great thing, but she offers a very clear and concise definition of patience. She writes that patience is not simply the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a good attitude while waiting. Patience is not simply the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a good attitude while waiting. Over the past 8 months or so, we have all been taking a high-level course in waiting. We are waiting for a vaccine, waiting for things to get back to normal, waiting to eat in a restaurant again, waiting to see loved ones face to face, waiting to be in our sanctuary worshiping and singing together, waiting for test results, waiting for loved ones to get better, waiting for memorial services. I said this was a high-level course in waiting. It turns out we could also take the same class as an even higher level, not just as a course in waiting, but we could take the same subject matter as a course in patience. Like those college courses that have undergraduates and graduates in the same classroom working on the same material, but they're taking different level courses. In our case, we all have a common textbook, which is the pandemic. So what will we learn from this book? What will we learn from this course that none of us registered for, but we've all been required to take? Or maybe after one semester of the course on waiting, we will be ready to advance to the next level course on patience. We can use the next many months to practice either one. We can practice our waiting. We can watch the calendar. We can practice worrying. We can practice imagining worst case scenarios. We can practice seeing the dark side of everything. We can practice being unhappy with the way things are. Or we can use this time to practice not just waiting, but patience. We can practice being in the moment. We can practice being conscious of our breath. We can practice awareness of the presence of God around us and within us. We can practice praying for others who suffer. We can practice being grateful for the good things that we have. In our story this morning, Daniel is really not the most interesting character. Even though it's often called Daniel in the lion's den, we don't know a lot about what he did in that lion's den when he was sealed up in there. We're going to have to guess about that. But we do know quite a lot about the other character in the story, the king. We know what level course the king was taking. When Daniel was in the lion's den, the king was practicing worrying. The king was practicing waiting only. And he had to wait. He did not just use that time to practice patience, to practice having a good attitude. Instead, he used it to wait. He was taking a lower level course. In some ways, surprisingly, the king in this story is a somewhat sympathetic character. It's possible there's a note of ridicule in the portrayal of him, but it's probable that we are intended to feel sympathetic toward him as well. He's a person who's deeply troubled by the mess that he's gotten himself into and the mess that he's gotten Daniel into. We were never able to hear the whole story because it was too long, but basically the king is manipulated by the local governors of his empire, just as Wendy said. They get him to pass a law that he does not really understand, or at least he understands the law, but not the consequences of what the law will be. We are told that in this empire, once the king passes a law, he cannot change it, which seems hard to believe that a king couldn't change his own law, but it does work as a nice plot device for the story. So the governors become jealous of Daniel, who is their superior. Daniel's more like a cabinet member in the king's court compared to these local governors. But mostly they're jealous because this is a foreigner. Daniel's Jewish in the Persian Empire, but he's really good at his job and he has authority over them. He's a Jew living in exile with administrative skills that have allowed him to rise to one of the highest levels in the royal court over many of these native Persian governors. And so they conspire to take him down. They know Daniel is incredibly devout, and that he prays 3 times a day in a fairly public way. He prays, it says, by his window of his apartment facing Jerusalem. So everybody can see him in the window praying. They conspire to have the king then pass a law that anyone who prays to anyone beside the king for 30 days will be thrown in the lion's den. It's a law simply designed to ensnare Daniel. The king, not knowing what's going on, agrees. He thinks that sounds pretty good. Not knowing that what he's about to do is going to endanger Daniel, who is someone that he actually likes, one of his most able administrators. Once the law is passed, and according to the story cannot be changed even by the king, the governors spring their trap. They catch Daniel praying and they report it to the king. Now the king must enforce this law that he passed and order the execution of someone he cares about, which, if you think about it, is a pretty complicated situation. And though we might not relate to it immediately, think about being stuck in a world where everything we do is somehow ethically compromised. The problems in the world are partly our own doing and partly out of our hands to change. I think that's kind of how the king found himself at this time. After they seal up Daniel in the lion's den, the king then just has to wait. Apparently he can open up the den in the morning, so he spends the whole night waiting. He didn't sleep at all, he says. It says he fasted, though it's not clear whether this fasting had any kind of spiritual focus or just he was so worried that he couldn't eat. I think it's probably the latter, because the text seems to communicate that this night was filled with anxiety, worry, and fear. Life had given the king this terrible situation that he was mostly responsible for, but now was out of his control. And he was required now to take this course in waiting. Or he could have taken the course in patience, but he chose to take the less advanced course. Now, as I said, we don't know what Daniel was doing in that lion's den exactly. We're not told whether he prayed in the lion's den or meditated in there or sang a song. It seems he did not spend the night hiding from the lions, because we're told that an angel came and shut their mouths. But given what we know about him, that he was a very faithful person, that he prayed 3 times a day, even when he knew the law was against him, that he had this rich, faithful life, and he was successful and admired by people not because of his birth, but because of his ability, we can guess that he was using this time well. We can guess that he was using this time to practice patience, to bring his faith with him into his time of waiting, which is actually a pretty good definition for patience also. Waiting with faith, waiting with God. As we enter this season of Advent, we're invited to practice not just waiting, but waiting with faith, to practice patience, to know that no matter what we are going through, God is with us. We're all signed up for the same lower level class on waiting, whether we want it or not, but we are called by God to a more advanced course in patience. On the most surface level, Advent is a time of waiting for Christmas Day. But that's only the most surface level of Advent. If we want to go deeper, we can think about waiting for the birth of the Christ child. If we want to go further, we can think about waiting for the second coming of Christ, a time when we envision justice, equality, and righteousness throughout the whole earth. And if we want to go deeper and further, we use this time to think about how Christ is always, constantly, eternally coming into the world. God is always inviting us into this relationship. God is always pursuing us. God is always ready to be there with us in our waiting. So this Advent season, let us not just practice waiting, but let us practice patience by waiting with faith.
For me, the hope in the Advent season period is not about a hope to come, but a hope that has come. And it's not about us waiting on a Jesus who will at some point reach us, but for us to reach out to those Jesus died for that are within reach.
I think that that Advent, that waiting, that arrival, or what's coming to us from the future, I think we can say that's God coming to us from the future, in a sense that, we're called to awaken to what's already in our midst. So it's that, I think Advent is a coming to a new consciousness of God, already loving us into something new, into something more whole. That we're not, in a sense, waiting for what's not there. We're, in a sense, to be attending to what's already there.
I have to hope in knowing that the King is already here. I can't wait for something to happen. It's that's not enough to keep me in this thing. I've got to know that the King has already made it, and that we're on the same page.
We can think of Advent as God is waiting for us to wake up, as if we're asleep in the manger, not Jesus. Jesus is, alive in our midst. And sometimes I do think we have things a little bit backwards. I think Jesus is in the manger and we've got to wake him up, and now, we have to do good things to one another. But what if we're in the manger and God is already awakened in our midst? And we're so fallen asleep, we're so kind of unconsciously asleep, that God is sort of looking for, will someone, get up and help, bring this, the gifts, into the world.
That whole Advent thing. Matter of fact, I have wrestled with it ever since becoming a Christian. Matter of fact, I was dialoguing with some young friends of mine recently, all of whom became followers of Jesus as a result of our encounters, and they were reminding me that they were followers of Jesus because of the resurrection. And they told me very, very candidly, like, Rudy, if he ain't alive, I'm out. And I had to understand that, because I really believe the same thing. If he ain't alive, I'm out.